The morning I found the bright orange citation flapping on my front door was the same morning I decided the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association had officially crossed the line. I stood there in my bathrobe, coffee mug steaming in the crisp October air of Boise, Idaho, staring at the paper that accused me of creating an unsightly accumulation of combustible materials on my property. My firewood. They were complaining about my firewood. The same firewood I had been carefully stacking along the side of my garage for the past 3 weeks, preparing for what the Weather Service promised would be a brutal winter. My name is Vincent Harper, and I have lived in this neighborhood for exactly 2 years. 2 years of relative peace, aside from the occasional passive-aggressive note about leaving my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection day. But this was different. This was about my ability to keep my family warm when the temperature dropped below freezing. I pulled the citation off the door and marched back inside, where my wife Sarah was making breakfast for our 2 kids. She looked up from the stove and immediately registered the expression on my face. "What now?" she asked, flipping a pancake. "They want me to remove my firewood, all of it. Within 72 hours or face a fine of $100 per day." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "You are kidding." "I wish I was." I slapped the citation down on the kitchen counter. "It is signed by Patricia Donovan herself." Of course it was Patricia. Patricia Donovan, the 48-year-old self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics, had been the president of the Riverside Meadows HOA for the past 5 years. She had shoulder-length blonde hair that she kept in what I called the speak to the manager cut, and she drove a white Mercedes SUV with a personalized license plate that read PRVLGD. I had never seen her smile genuinely. Only that tight-lipped expression that people make when they are pretending to be pleasant while secretly plotting your demise. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "I have no idea. We need that firewood. The furnace is 20 years old, and you know how expensive heating oil is getting." My son Marcus, who was 10, looked up from his cereal. "Are we going to be cold this winter, Dad?" "No, buddy. I will figure something out." But figuring something out proved more complicated than I anticipated. That afternoon, after dropping the kids at school, I drove to the HOA office, which was located in a small building near the neighborhood entrance. Patricia was there, naturally, sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been transported directly from a corporate executive's corner office. Everything was white and chrome and aggressively modern. "Vincent," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I assumed you would stop by. Patricia, I need to talk about this citation. I need that firewood for the winter." She folded her hands on the desk. "I understand your concerns, but the rules are quite clear. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA covenant states that no homeowner shall store materials in a manner that creates a visual blight or safety hazard. It is firewood, not a junkyard. It is neatly stacked. Neatly stacked or not, it is visible from the street. Several neighbors have complained." "Which neighbors?" Her smile tightened. "That information is confidential, but I assure you the complaints are legitimate." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "What if I move it to the backyard?" Section 7, Paragraph 5 prohibits storage of combustible materials within 50 feet of any structure. "Then where exactly am I supposed to put it?" Patricia opened a folder on her desk and pulled out a glossy brochure. "There are several approved firewood storage solutions. You could rent a storage unit off the property, or you could reduce the quantity to an amount that can be stored inside your garage. My garage is full of our cars and tools and everything else. And a storage unit would cost me hundreds of dollars a month." "Those are your options, Vincent. The deadline stands," 72 hours. I left the office feeling like I had just been dismissed by a petty dictator. This was not about neighborhood aesthetics. This was about control. Patricia got off on enforcing arbitrary rules that made people's lives harder. Back home, I stood in my driveway and stared at my firewood stack. It was about 8 feet long, 4 feet high, and 2 feet deep. Maybe 3 cords total, which was exactly what I needed to supplement our heating through the winter. The wood was split oak and maple, seasoned properly, and I had spent weeks cutting and hauling it from a friend's property outside town. Sarah joined me outside. What did she say? Nothing helpful. She wants me to either pay for storage or get rid of most of it. That is ridiculous. I know. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then Sarah said, "What about building something like a shed or a cover? The HOA has rules about structures too. I would need approval." "So get approval. Submit plans for something they cannot say no to." I looked at my wife. That might actually work. That evening, I spent hours researching HOA regulations for our neighborhood and looking at shed designs online. The covenant was frustratingly specific about some things and maddeningly vague about others. But I found something interesting. There was an approved list of accessory structures that homeowners could build without going through the full architectural review process. The list included things like small garden sheds, dog houses, and decorative gazebos, as long as they met certain aesthetic standards. The key word was aesthetic. The structures had to complement the existing architectural style of the home and neighborhood. They had to use approved materials and colors, and they had to be professionally designed or constructed to professional standards. I started sketching. What if I built a wood shed that was so attractive, so perfectly in line with the neighborhood aesthetic, that Patricia could not possibly reject it? It would be expensive, sure, but cheaper than paying fines or renting a storage unit for the next 5 years. By midnight, I had a rough design. A small shed with cedar siding that matched my house, a peaked roof with architectural shingles, decorative trim, and even a small window with shutters. It would be more like a tiny cottage than a firewood storage unit. The wood would be completely enclosed and invisible from the street. The next morning, I took my sketches to a local architect named Robert Chen, who had designed several homes in the area. His office was in downtown Boise, in a renovated brick building near the river. "I need help dealing with my HOA," I told him, explaining my situation. Robert laughed. "Welcome to Riverside Meadows. Patricia Donovan, you know her. Everyone in the business knows her. She has rejected more architectural plans than any other HOA president in the county. But she is consistent, I will give her that. If you play by her rules exactly, she has to approve it. Can you help me design something she cannot reject?" "Absolutely. Let me see what you have got." We spent the next 2 hours refining my design. Robert added proper engineering specifications, ensured everything met building codes, and created professional elevation drawings. The final design was beautiful. It looked like a miniature version of a backyard guest house, something you would see featured in a home and garden magazine. "This will hold all your firewood?" Robert asked. "And then some. The interior will be about 8 by 10 feet with 6-foot walls, plenty of space." "Good. Now, here is the key. You need to submit this as an accessory structure for garden and outdoor equipment storage. Do not mention firewood in the application." "Is that dishonest?" "No, it is strategic. Firewood is outdoor equipment. You burn it outdoors in your fireplace. You are not lying. You are just not giving Patricia ammunition to reject it based on some obscure safety regulation about combustible materials." Robert helped me fill out the application that afternoon. We included the professional drawings, photos of similar structures from upscale neighborhoods, and documentation showing that every material and color was on the HOA's approved list. We even included a landscape plan showing how I would plant decorative shrubs around the base of the shed to enhance the neighborhood aesthetic. I submitted the application to the HOA office the next day. Patricia was not there, which was a relief. A younger woman named Jennifer took my paperwork and time-stamped it. "You should hear back within 30 days, she said. 30 days. My citation says I have to remove my firewood in 72 hours, which is tomorrow." Jennifer frowned, checking her computer. "Oh, I see the citation. Let me make a note that you have submitted a storage structure application. That should put the citation on hold pending review." Should or will. I cannot make any promises, but typically, if you are actively trying to resolve the issue, they will not assess fines while your application is pending. Typically. Not exactly reassuring, but it was better than nothing. I went home and waited. The 72-hour deadline came and went. No one from the HOA showed up. No new citations appeared on my door. The firewood remained stacked against my garage. 2 weeks passed. The weather got colder. I started using the wood in our fireplace on particularly chilly evenings, which meant I had to carry logs from outside, through the house, creating a trail of bark and debris that Sarah was not thrilled about. Any word from the HOA? She asked one night as I dumped an armload of logs beside the hearth. Nothing yet. Jennifer said 30 days. That is cutting it close. It is already November. She was right. The forecast showed a cold front moving in from Canada, with temperatures potentially dropping into the teens. I needed to build that shed soon, or we would be facing a miserable winter. On day 27, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something told me to pick up. "Mr. Harper, this is Patricia Donovan from the Riverside Meadows HOA. I am calling about your accessory structure application." My stomach tightened. "Yes. I have reviewed your plans with the architectural committee. We have some concerns." Of course they did. What kind of concerns? The structure seems quite large for a garden equipment storage shed. "We are wondering if you might be planning to use it for other purposes." "Like what?" "Well, that is what we are trying to determine. The covenant has specific regulations about accessory dwellings and rental units. We want to ensure this structure will not be used as living space." "It is 8 by 10 feet with 6-foot walls and no plumbing or electricity." "Who would live in there?" "Mr. Harper, there is no need to be defensive. We are simply doing our due diligence. Could you come to the next board meeting to present your application in person?" This was a tactic. I knew it. Patricia wanted me to stand in front of the board so she could grill me and find some reason to reject the application, but I did not have a choice. "When is the meeting?" "This Thursday at 7 in the evening at the community center." "I will be there." Thursday arrived faster than I wanted. I spent hours preparing a presentation, printing additional photos of similar structures, and rehearsing answers to every possible question Patricia might throw at me. Robert Chen had warned me. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and do not let her bait you into an argument. The community center meeting room was set up like a courtroom, with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of chairs for residents. About a dozen people were scattered in the audience, probably there to watch the show. Patricia sat in the center of the board table, flanked by 4 other board members I vaguely recognized from neighborhood events. "Application number 23-47, Patricia announced, reading from her papers. "Vincent Harper, requesting approval for an accessory structure at 142 Willow Creek Drive. Mr. Harper, please come forward." I walked to the front of the room, carrying my folder of documents. A small podium faced the board table. "Good evening," I said, trying to sound confident. "Thank you for reviewing my application. As you can see from the plans prepared by Robert Chen, a licensed architect, the proposed structure fully complies with all HOA covenants regarding accessory buildings. The materials, colors, and design are all on the approved lists. The structure will be used for storage of garden and outdoor equipment, which is an explicitly permitted use under Section 9 of the covenant." Patricia did not look at me. She was studying the plans with an expression that suggested she was examining evidence of a crime. "Mr. Harper, this structure has a window. Why does a storage shed need a window?" "For ventilation and light. It is a standard feature in quality outbuildings. It also has decorative shutters. That seems excessive for equipment storage. The covenant requires that accessory structures complement the aesthetic of the neighborhood. I am following that requirement." One of the other board members, a man named Gary who I had met at a neighborhood barbecue once, spoke up. "I think it looks nice, actually. Better than most of the sheds I see around here." Patricia shot him a look that could have frozen lava. "The question is not whether it looks nice, Gary. The question is whether it complies with our regulations and whether it serves the stated purpose." She turned back to me. "Mr. Harper, I am going to ask you directly. Is this shed intended for firewood storage?" The room went silent. This was the trap. If I said yes, she would cite the combustible materials regulations. If I said no, she could later accuse me of misrepresenting my application. "The shed is intended for storage of outdoor equipment," I said carefully, "which may include firewood, along with garden tools, lawn equipment, and other items." "So it is for firewood. It is for outdoor storage. Firewood is one of several items I plan to store there." Patricia sat back in her chair. "Mr. Harper, I am sure you are aware that Section 7, Paragraph 5 prohibits storage of combustible materials within 50 feet of any structure." "I am aware. The proposed shed will be located 60 feet from my house, well outside that radius." "But the shed itself is a structure." "Yes, a structure designed for the purpose of storing items. That is what storage structures are for, combustible materials. Wood, it is wood. The same material my house is framed with, the same material in every fence and deck in this neighborhood." I could feel my frustration rising, and I forced myself to take a breath. Robert had warned me about this. Patricia was trying to get me to lose my cool. "The covenant does not prohibit storing firewood," I continued, keeping my voice level. "It prohibits creating a visual blight or safety hazard with outdoor storage. My proposal addresses both concerns by enclosing the materials in an attractive, code-compliant structure." Another board member, a woman named Susan, raised her hand slightly. "Patricia, I think we should consider that Mr. Harper has gone to considerable effort and expense to address our concerns. The original citation was about visible storage. This proposal solves that problem. Susan, we have to consider the broader implications. If we approve this, we are setting a precedent that anyone can build a large storage shed for firewood." "Is that a bad precedent?" Susan asked. "Half the neighborhood has fireplaces. I am sure other people would appreciate proper storage options." Patricia's jaw tightened. I could tell she was losing control of the board, and she did not like it. "I would like to table this discussion for further review," Patricia said. "Patricia, the application has been under review for almost 30 days, Gary said. "We need to make a decision tonight. That is our policy." "I am recommending denial based on ambiguity of purpose and potential safety concerns." "I would like to call for a vote," Susan said. Patricia looked like she had just been slapped. "Fine. All in favor of approving application 23-47. Susan and Gary raised their hands immediately. The other two board members, who had not spoken the entire meeting, looked at each other nervously. Finally, one of them, an older man named Ted, raised his hand as well. 3 in favor, Patricia said icily. All opposed. She and the remaining board member, a woman named Carol, raised their hands. The application is approved 3-2, Susan said, since Patricia seemed unwilling to say the words. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you. You will need to obtain proper building permits from the city, Patricia added quickly. And the structure must be completed within 90 days of permit issuance. Any deviation from the approved plans will result in immediate citation and potential removal at your expense. Understood. I left the meeting feeling victorious but wary. Patricia was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. I needed to build this shed quickly and perfectly, leaving no room for her to find violations. The next morning, I went to the Boise City Planning Office and applied for a building permit. The clerk who helped me was friendly and efficient. Nice design, she said, looking at Robert's drawings. Should be straightforward. Permit should be ready in about a week. That fast. It is just a small accessory structure on an existing residential lot. As long as you are not adding plumbing or electrical, it is pretty simple. The permit came through 6 days later. I picked it up on a Friday afternoon and immediately started calling contractors. Most were booked solid through the end of the year. Winter construction season in Idaho was limited, and everyone was rushing to finish outdoor projects. I finally found a builder named Mike Torres who had a gap in his schedule. We met at my house that weekend to go over the project. I can start Monday, Mike said. But I need to tell you, weather is going to be a factor. If we get snow or if the temperature drops below 20 degrees, I will have to pause work. How long will it take, if the weather holds? 2 weeks, maybe 3. We need to pour a concrete pad, frame it, side it, roof it. The window and trim will be the most time-consuming part. Let's do it. Mike and his crew showed up Monday morning at 7. The sound of saws and hammers echoed through the neighborhood. I had taken the week off work to oversee the project and help where I could. The concrete pad went in the first day. While it cured, Mike's crew started cutting lumber and preparing materials. By Wednesday, the framing was up. The structure started to take shape, looking exactly like the drawings Robert had created. Thursday morning, Patricia appeared in my driveway. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, trying to sound pleasant. She ignored the greeting. "I am here to inspect the construction. The HOA approved the plans. The city issued the permit. Everything is proceeding exactly as specified. I have a right to ensure compliance." Mike walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Can I help you?" "I am Patricia Donovan, HOA president. I am here to inspect this structure." "You have some kind of official capacity to do that." Patricia pulled out a laminated card from her purse. "I am a certified HOA compliance inspector." Mike looked at me and shrugged. "She can look, but do not touch anything. We have safety protocols." Patricia walked around the structure, taking photos with her phone, measuring things with a tape measure she had brought. She spent 20 minutes examining every detail. "The peak of the roof is 6 inches higher than specified in the plans," she finally announced. Mike checked his own measurements. "No, it is not. It is exactly as specified, 5 feet at the peak." "I measured 5 feet 6 inches. You are measuring wrong. You have to measure from the pad to the peak center point, not from the ground to the edge of the fascia." They argued for another 10 minutes about measurement methodology. Finally, Mike said, "Lady, I have been building structures for 20 years. This is correct. If you have a problem, take it up with the city inspector when they come out for the final inspection." Patricia's face flushed red. "I will be reporting this. You do that." She left in a huff, tires squealing as she drove away in her Mercedes. "Is she always like that?" Mike asked. That was her being polite. The construction continued. By the end of the second week, the shed was almost complete. The cedar siding looked beautiful, stained to match my house perfectly. The roof shingles were the exact same architectural style and color. The window had white trimmed shutters that added a charming cottage feel. Mike even built a small covered entry area with decorative brackets. "This is the nicest firewood shed I have ever built," Mike said, standing back to admire the work. "Honestly, you could rent this thing out as a tiny house." Do not let Patricia hear you say that. She will find a way to cite me for running an illegal hotel. The city inspector came out for the final inspection on a Tuesday afternoon. He spent 15 minutes checking the structure, reviewing the plans, and signing off on the permit. "You are all set," he said. "Nice work." With the shed complete and approved, I spent the next day moving my firewood, 3 cords of oak and maple, carefully stacked inside the beautiful new structure. When I was done, I stood back and looked at what I had created. From the street, you could not see the firewood at all. The shed looked like an intentional architectural feature, something that added value to the property rather than detracting from it. Sarah came out to see the finished product. "Wow, that is actually gorgeous. It should be." It cost me $8,000. $8,000. The architect was $1,500. Materials and labor were the rest, but it will pay for itself eventually. And more importantly, Patricia cannot touch it. That night, I built a fire using wood from my new shed. I took a photo of the fireplace blazing, my family warm and comfortable, and almost posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with a caption about finally having proper storage for outdoor equipment. But Sarah talked me out of it. "Do not poke the bear," she said. "You won." She was right. I had won. The shed was built, approved, and legal. Patricia had no grounds to cite me, fine me, or force me to remove it, but I should have known better. Patricia was not done. 2 weeks later, I got another citation. This one claimed that I was operating a commercial firewood sales operation from my property, in violation of the covenant's prohibition on home businesses. I called the HOA office immediately. Jennifer answered. "What is this about commercial firewood sales?" "I am not sure, Mr. Harper." "Let me pull up your file." I heard keyboard clicking. "It says here that multiple neighbors reported seeing you loading large quantities of firewood into vehicles at your property." "I am not selling firewood. I am using it." "You have any vehicles coming to your property to pick up firewood?" "My father-in-law came by last weekend. I gave him some logs because his back is bad and he could not cut his own this year. That is not a commercial operation." "I understand your frustration, Mr. Harper, but we have to investigate all complaints." "Who filed the complaint?" "I cannot disclose that information." I hung up and immediately drove to the HOA office. This time Patricia was there. "Patricia, we need to talk." "Mr. Harper, if you are here about the citation, I suggest you respond in writing within the required time frame." "I am not running a business." "I helped out my father-in-law, that is it. We have reports of multiple vehicles, one vehicle, one time, and it was a family member." Patricia folded her hands on her desk. "The covenant is clear about home businesses. I am not running a business. Please lower your voice. If you continue to be disruptive, I will have to ask you to leave." I took a breath. "Patricia, what is this really about? I built the shed you approved. I am following all the rules. Why are you harassing me?" "Harassment is a serious accusation, Mr. Harper." "I am simply enforcing the covenant that you agreed to when you purchased your home." "No. You are targeting me because I challenged you, because you did not want to approve my shed and the board overruled you." Her expression did not change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. I had hit the truth. "I am going to ask you to leave now," she said. I left, but I was not giving up. That evening, I started digging into HOA law in Idaho. I spent hours reading statutes, case law, and homeowner rights websites. I learned something interesting. HOA boards have a fiduciary duty to act in good faith and in the best interest of all homeowners. Selective enforcement of rules, especially when motivated by personal animosity, could be considered a breach of that duty. I also learned that HOA board members could be held personally liable for certain violations, particularly if they abused their authority or violated homeowner rights. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel Martinez, and she specialized in HOA disputes. Her office was in Meridian, just west of Boise. "Tell me what is going on," Rachel said when we met. I laid out the whole story. The original Firewood citation, the shed approval battle, and now the bogus commercial operation claim. Rachel took notes while I talked. When I finished, she sat back and nodded. "This is textbook selective enforcement. The question is, do you want to fight it, or do you want to resolve it? What is the difference? Fighting means we could potentially sue the HOA for harassment and breach of fiduciary duty. It would be expensive, time-consuming, and stressful. Resolving it means we send a strongly worded letter making it clear that you know your rights and that further baseless citations will result in legal action." Most HOA presidents back down when they realize the homeowner has legal representation. "Let us try the letter first." Rachel drafted a letter that was polite but firm. It outlined the timeline of events, cited specific Idaho statutes about HOA board duties, and made it clear that any further citations without legitimate basis would be considered harassment and would result in legal action, including potential personal liability for board members. We sent the letter certified mail. Patricia signed for it 3 days later. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. No new citations, no phone calls. I started to think maybe the letter had worked. Then I came home one evening to find a truck parked in front of my house. 2 men were in my backyard, taking photos of my shed. "Can I help you?" I called out. One of the men turned. He was wearing a polo shirt with a company logo I did not recognize. "We are from Summit Property Inspections. The HOA hired us to do a safety inspection of your accessory structure. I have all the permits and approvals. The city signed off on it." "Yes, sir. We are just doing what we were hired to do." They spent 30 minutes measuring, photographing, and examining every detail of the shed. When they were done, they handed me a business card. "You should get our report in about a week," one of them said. I called Rachel immediately. "They hired an outside inspection company," she said. "That is unusual and expensive. HOAs do not usually spend money on third-party inspections unless they are looking for ammunition." "What do I do?" "Wait for the report. If they claim to find violations, we will review it and respond." "But Vincent, I need to tell you something. If Patricia is willing to spend HOA funds on this kind of vendetta, she might not back down easily." Some HOA presidents see legal threats as a challenge rather than a deterrent. The report arrived 8 days later, delivered by certified mail. It was 40 pages long, full of technical jargon and photos. The conclusion claimed that the shed had multiple code violations and safety concerns, including insufficient ventilation for combustible material storage, roof pitch deviation from approved plans, inadequate drainage around foundation, non-compliant lumber grade for load-bearing members, was complete nonsense. The city had approved the structure. A licensed contractor had built it, but I knew that did not matter to Patricia. She was going to use this report to force me to modify or remove the shed. I forwarded the report to both Rachel and Mike Torres. Mike called me within an hour. This report is garbage. Whoever wrote this has no idea what they are talking about. The roof pitch is exact. The lumber is all properly graded and stamped. The drainage is better than code requires. This is a hit job. Can you document that? Absolutely. I kept all my receipts and photos from the build. I can prove every single one of these claims is false. Rachel was equally confident. This is good, actually. If the HOA is relying on a fraudulent inspection report to justify citations, that strengthens your case significantly. It shows bad faith. We prepared a detailed response, including Mike's documentation, photos, and a point-by-point rebuttal of every claim in the inspection report. We sent it to the HOA board with a cover letter from Rachel explaining that the inspection report appeared to contain numerous false statements, and that pursuing action based on those statements would expose the board to liability. This time, Patricia did not respond to the letter. Instead, I got a call from Gary, the board member who had voted in favor of my shed. "Vincent, this is Gary Brennan from the HOA board. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Sure." "I want you to know that not everyone on the board supports what is happening. Susan, Ted, and I reviewed the inspection report and your response. We think Patricia has gone too far. We are calling a special board meeting to discuss this situation." "When?" "Tomorrow night. I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia does not know I am calling you." The special board meeting was tense from the moment I walked in. Patricia sat at the center of the board table, looking like a general preparing for battle. Susan, Gary, and Ted sat with noticeably different body language, more open and less defensive. "This meeting is about the ongoing compliance issues at 142 Willow Creek Drive," Patricia began. "No," Susan interrupted. "This meeting is about whether this board is going to continue pursuing baseless violations against a homeowner who has followed every rule." Patricia's face flushed. "Baseless? We have a professional inspection report documenting multiple violations." Gary spoke up. "Patricia, I reviewed that report with a structural engineer friend of mine. He said it is full of errors and mischaracterizations. The shed is fine. The city approved it. We approved it. This needs to stop. We have a duty to ensure safety. We have a duty to act in good faith," Ted added. "And I do not think we are doing that here. I think you have a personal issue with Mr. Harper and you are using your position to harass him." The room went silent. I had never heard anyone on the board directly challenge Patricia like that. Patricia stood up. "I am not going to sit here and be accused of harassment. I have served this community for 5 years, enforcing the rules that protect property values for everyone." "No one is questioning your service," Susan said calmly. "But in this case, I think we need to acknowledge that we have overstepped. Mr. Harper has done everything we asked. He built a beautiful structure that complies with every regulation. The inspection report does not hold up to scrutiny. We need to drop this and move on. I will not vote to dismiss valid violations. Then we will vote without your support," Gary said. "All in favor of dismissing all pending citations against 142 Willow Creek Drive and closing this matter." Susan, Gary, and Ted raised their hands. 3 in favor. Motion passes. Patricia grabbed her papers and walked out of the meeting without another word. I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "You should not have to thank us for doing the right thing," Susan said. "And Vincent, I want to apologize. We should have reined this in sooner." Over the next few days, I received official letters from the HOA dismissing all citations and closing my file. The nightmare seemed to be over, but Patricia had one more move to make. 3 weeks later, Susan called me. "Vincent, I need to tell you something. Patricia resigned from the board this morning." "Really?" "Yes, but that is not why I am calling. Before she resigned, she sent an email to the entire neighborhood claiming that the board had become corrupt and was allowing code violations to slide in exchange for bribes. She specifically mentioned your shed as an example of the board ignoring safety concerns. That is defamation. I know. Several of us on the board are discussing legal options, but I wanted you to know so you could decide how to handle it. I forwarded Susan's email to Rachel. She read Patricia's email blast and whistled. This is pretty clear defamation. She is making specific false claims about you bribing officials. You could sue her personally. Would we win? Probably. The statements are demonstrably false. You have documentation showing you followed all proper procedures. The question is whether it is worth the time and money to pursue it. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to make Patricia pay for the months of stress and harassment. But another part of me just wanted to move on with my life. In the end, Rachel sent Patricia a cease and desist letter, demanding that she send a retraction email to the neighborhood and agree not to make any further false statements. The letter included a summary of our evidence and made it clear that any further defamatory statements would result in immediate legal action. Patricia sent a retraction email 2 days later. It was brief and clearly written by a lawyer, but it admitted that her previous email contained inaccurate statements based on incomplete information, and apologized for any confusion or concern. It was not the full accountability I would have liked, but it was something. Winter came hard that year, just as the forecasters had predicted. Temperatures in Boise dropped into the single digits for weeks at a time. Our furnace ran constantly, and our heating oil bills were astronomical. But every evening, I would walk out to my beautiful cedar shed, load up an armful of seasoned firewood, and build a fire that kept our living room warm and comfortable. The kids loved it. Marcus started calling the shed Dad's Fortress, and our younger daughter Emma liked to help me carry logs, though she could only manage one small piece at a time. Sarah and I sat by the fire one particularly cold January evening after the kids had gone to bed. We had glasses of wine and were enjoying the quiet crackle of burning oak. Was it worth it? She asked. What? All the fighting, the stress, the lawyer fees. Was the shed worth it? I looked at the fire. You know what? Yes, not because of the firewood really. Because Patricia needed to learn that she could not just bully people into submission. Because the other board members needed to see that someone would stand up to her. And because I needed to prove to myself that I could fight back against that kind of petty tyranny and win. Very philosophical. I've had a lot of time to think about it while stacking wood. The next spring, the neighborhood held elections for new HOA board positions. Susan ran for president and won easily. Gary and Ted retained their seats. 2 new members joined the board, both of whom campaigned on platforms of reasonable enforcement and focusing on actual community improvement rather than harassing homeowners over minor issues. At the first board meeting under the new leadership, Susan proposed a revision to the covenant that would explicitly allow firewood storage in approved structures and would streamline the approval process for small accessory buildings. The motion passed unanimously. Several neighbors came to me afterward asking for the name of my contractor and architect. By summer, 3 other families in the neighborhood had built similar sheds. Mike Torres sent me a fruit basket as a thank you for the referrals. Patricia moved out of the neighborhood in June. I heard through the grapevine that she had taken a position on the HOA board of a different community across town. I felt sorry for those homeowners, but grateful that she was no longer my problem. One Saturday afternoon in early July, I was out mowing my lawn when a car pulled up. An older couple got out and approached me. "Excuse me," the man said. We are thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions about living here? Sure. How is the HOA? We have had some bad experiences in our current neighborhood. I thought about how to answer that. A year ago, I would have told them to run away, but things had changed. The HOA is pretty reasonable now, I said. New leadership this year. They focus on actual community issues rather than hassling people over minor stuff. That is good to hear. We saw you have a nice shed back there. Did you have any trouble getting that approved? I smiled. There is a story about that shed, but the short version is, as long as you follow the rules and work with the board in good faith, they will work with you. The previous president was difficult, but she is gone now. That is exactly what we needed to hear. Thank you. They bought a house 2 streets over and moved in a month later. I saw them at a neighborhood barbecue in August. They had already submitted plans for a similar shed. Susan approved it in less than a week. That fall, as the weather started turning cold again, I began the annual ritual of stocking my shed for winter. I had gotten better at managing my supply, knowing exactly how much I needed and when to burn what types of wood for optimal heat. Marcus, now 11, helped me stack the new cord of maple I had cut from a fallen tree on a friend's property. "Dad, why did Mrs. Donovan hate our shed so much?" he asked. It was a good question. I had spent a lot of time thinking about it myself. "I do not think she hated the shed," I said. "I think she was someone who felt important because she could control things. When people challenged her control, it made her feel like she was losing power, so she fought harder. That is dumb. Yeah, it kind of is. But that is why rules and fairness are important. No one person should have too much power over other people's lives. Is that why you fought back?" "That is exactly why." We finished stacking the wood and stepped back to admire the neat rows. The shed was seasoned now, weathered slightly by a year of Idaho winters and summers. It looked even better than when it was new, like it had always been part of the property. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Fire weather tonight. Low of 35. It was early September, but the nights were getting cold. Time to test out the new supply." That evening, with my family gathered around another blazing fire, I thought about everything that had happened. The stress and frustration of dealing with Patricia. The satisfaction of building something beautiful and functional. The unexpected education I had gotten in HOA law, construction permits, and neighborhood politics. I had set out just to store my firewood without getting fined. But I had ended up doing something more important. I had stood up to a bully, helped change a toxic board culture, and maybe even made my neighborhood a slightly better place to live. Plus, I had the nicest firewood shed in Riverside Meadows, possibly in all of Boise. That counted for something too. Sarah nudged me. "You have got that look on your face." "What look?" "The satisfied look. The I won and I know it look. Can you blame me? This fire would not be possible if I had given up." "No, it would not. I am proud of you for fighting." Emma climbed into my lap, sleepy from the warmth. "Tell the story about the shed again." I laughed. "You have heard it 100 times, but it is a good story." She was right. It was a good story. Not because it had a dramatic climax or unexpected twists, but because it was a simple story about standing up for what was right, following the rules while not letting someone abuse their authority, and finding a creative solution to a petty problem. The fire crackled. The room was warm. My family was comfortable. And in my backyard stood a testament to the principle that sometimes the best revenge against bureaucratic nonsense is to do things so correctly, so perfectly, that your opponents have no choice but to approve what they wanted to deny. The shed held enough firewood to last through the coldest winter. But more than that, it held proof that one person, armed with patience, determination, and a good architect, could take on a tyrannical HOA president and win. As the evening wore on and the kids eventually went to bed, I added another log to the fire. Seasoned oak from my personal supply, stored in my HOA-approved, city-permitted, architecturally beautiful shed. The log caught quickly, flames dancing along the bark before settling into a steady burn. Outside, the temperature dropped. Inside, we were warm. And somewhere across town, Patricia Donovan was probably making someone else's life miserable over the length of their grass or the color of their mailbox. But she was not making my life miserable anymore. That was what mattered. I poured another glass of wine and settled deeper into my chair. Tomorrow, I would need to bring in another load of wood. The forecast showed temperatures in the 20s by the end of the week, but I was ready. I had 3 cords of properly seasoned wood, a beautiful shed to store it in, and the satisfaction of knowing I had earned every bit of it. The war with my HOA was over. And I had won not by breaking the rules, but by following them so precisely that even Patricia could not find fault. Well, could not find fault that would hold up to scrutiny anyway. It was a good lesson. Sometimes you do not beat the system by fighting against it. You beat it by using it exactly as it was designed, forcing the people abusing the system to play by the same rules they claim to enforce. The fire burned late into the night. Outside, the first real cold snap of autumn settled over riverside meadows. But inside my house, with my family safe and warm, surrounded by the fruits of my labor and my stubbornness, everything was exactly as it should be. And that beautiful cedar shed in my backyard, it would stand for decades, a permanent reminder that sometimes the best solution to an HOA problem is not confrontation or capitulation, but creativity and persistence. I finally understood what my father had told me years ago when I first bought the house. Choose your battles, but when you do choose one, fight it all the way. I had chosen, I had fought, and I had won. The next morning, I woke to frost on the grass and a neighborhood message board notification on my phone. Someone had posted asking for advice about dealing with an HOA citation for a kid's playhouse that was allegedly too large. I smiled and started typing my response. Let me tell you about the time I built a shed,